What's going on, guys? TJ here with Daily Grind Fantasy Sports to bring you this 4-game, 7 p.m. NBA Sunday slate. Excited to break this down for you guys. We have some really important injury news that we are still pending. So let's go ahead and dive right into this 4-game slate. First, I want to touch base on the matchups and the over-unders that we do have. We currently have the Sixers in Indiana sitting at a 225 current over-under. We have the Orlando Magic and the Toronto Raptors sitting at a 214.5 over-under. Opened up at 216. It's now dropped 2 points. We have the Nets and the Wizards at an absurd 244 live over-under right now. So you could sit here and say there's going to be a lot of good plays, a lot of chalk plays from that game, just given that over-under and the amount of points that we could potentially see. And last but not least, at the 8 o'clock game, we have the Cavs and the Minnesota Timberwolves currently sitting at a 218 over-under. Now let's touch base on some of these injuries we already have and some that we are still pending. So in the 76ers and Indiana game, we have Embiid currently questionable with the lower back that he sustained against the Lakers when LeBron two-hand pushed him. Wasn't really a push, but he didn't even help him up. It's kind of pretty rude of LeBron there. But even still, Embiid gutted it out, played the next game, so I fully expect him to play tonight against Indiana. We have Mike Scott, who has been out, so not much changes there in Philly as long as Embiid is good to go. On the Indiana side of the ball, obviously, no more Oladipo. LeVert is out, as is Warren, and we have McDermott, who left the game Friday against Charlotte with a back injury as well. Was unable to return, so he remains questionable. If he is out, that gives some usage boosts to guys like Jeremy Lamb, Justin Holiday. So this is something that we need to monitor between Philly and Indiana. Excuse me. Fully expect Embiid to be good, but I'm unsure about McDermott, so we'll have to monitor that. Next, we have this Brooklyn and Wizards game with the absurd 244 over-under. We have James Harden actually carrying a questionable tag right now because of a thigh contusion that he picked up in Friday night's win. So we are currently waiting on that news, and that's going to be huge if he does sit, especially in this high over-under. It's going to give some really big usage bumps to guys like Kyrie and KD, Bruce Brown, TLC. So this is something we really need to keep our eye on throughout the day, because if he sits, this is already going to be a game that we're going to want to target because of how high the over-under is. But if he sits, it's just going to make it that much better. On the Wizards side of the ball, we've been seeing these guys sit for so long with COVID and everything like that and the tracings. But now everybody is back except for Raul Nato. So we almost have a full Wizards roster. Hopefully the 3-12 Wizards can figure it out. I don't know if they can. Then we have Orlando and Toronto. We still have Michael Carter-Williams out in Aminu. Okiki, obviously, I don't think he's played this year, so pretty irrelevant. But yeah, so we have Aminu and Michael Carter-Williams still out. And then in Toronto, we have Norman Powell currently doubtful, and then OG Anunoby out. So some really good value there in Toronto that we're going to talk about here shortly. Cleveland, we still have Dellavedova and Kevin Love out. And then Minnesota, we have Kat, Hernan Gomez, and Culver still out. And we have questionable tags on D'Lo and Naz Reid. I expect D'Lo to play. Unsure about Reid. He was a late scratch against Philly because of the wrist. So I'm not too sure what is going to be going on with Naz Reid if he is out. That does give some slight boost to guys like Ed Davis, who I would expect to start. Vanderbilt. There's some other guys that I want to get to as well. So let's go ahead and dive into this first game between Philly and Indiana. We're going to focus here on Philly to start. And after running numbers, nothing really pops out on the sheet for me. If Embiid is out, that will give huge usage boosts to guys like Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris. Dwight Howard would obviously get the start. Tony Bradley would become an interesting tournament play. But yeah, for now, if Embiid is good to go, he's probably going to be my favorite play here at 9,900, banging down low with guys like Sabonis and Miles Turner. He's a 1.53 fantasy point per minute this year with just Mike Scott off the floor. 31.6% usage bump for a big is absolutely absurd. Leads the team in usage, as you can see. Tobias Harris with the second most at a 24% usage rate. So I'll have some interest here, but more tournament plays. I don't expect these guys to carry some ownership. And if we actually go to Fantasy Cruncher and we just go to Philly, if we're looking at ownership, Ben Simmons actually carrying the most at 7,900. It is a pretty cheap price tag here for Ben Simmons. Again, I have some interest here in tournaments, but I don't have any interest here in cash. On the other side of the ball with Indiana, that Sabonis price tag is very cheap at 9,100. It is coming down a little bit. We've seen him almost approach and get to 10K at least once this year, which he was against Toronto, all the way back down to 9,100. So I'll have some interest there in Sabonis in tournaments. Rates out pretty well on the sheet, but I'm most interested to see if McDermott's going to be good to go or not. McDermott's out. I'll have some love for guys like Justin Holiday, who obviously already playing 34 minutes. His minute increase won't be that impacted by Doug McDermott, but a guy like Jeremy Lamb might be, as would TJ McConnell and Aaron Holiday as well. So I'll have some interest here in Indiana. I don't have any cash plays, but in terms of tournaments, this is going to be a game that I'm going to target because there's going to be a lot of plays here from Brooklyn, guys, and solely because of this over-under that we have, and it's currently massive. So I went and ran numbers for James Harden off the floor. Obviously, Dinwiddie out with the ACL and LeVert and Jared Allen getting traded. So what we're looking at here, if James Harden does potentially sit, are usage boosts to guys like KD, TLC, Bruce Brown, who I would expect to start, but I'm not too sure. Kyrie gets a 2% usage bump as well. Joe Harris, 3.6% usage bump. And then some of these fantasy point per minutes are really high. A guy like KD at 33% usage rate at a 1.53 fantasy point per minute with Harden off the floor. We have Kyrie as well at 1.22 fantasy point per minute and a 31% usage rate. So if Harden is in, I still have interest here in guys like KD and Kyrie. I think their price tags are relatively cheap in this really high over-under against Washington. They both rate out pretty decent on the sheet right now. I would have KD pegged for 50.4 DraftKings points and Kyrie at 42.3 if Harden is in. If Harden is out, I'll be locking in KD 100%. I'll most likely be locking in Kyrie 100% as well in terms of cash. Those would be my two favorite cash plays currently, or two of my favorite cash plays if Harden is out. So this is something we really need to monitor throughout the day. So let's everybody make sure that we are keeping an eye on this. But I'll have some significant interest here in Brooklyn. I could see myself rostering two of these guys in cash, even if Harden is good to go. If he's out, I could potentially see 3 to 4. On the other side of the ball, we have Washington. A lot of these guys are back now. Ish Smith, Avdija. We've had Bertans and Rue make their way back. We got Mo Wagner, back in the mix. Troy Brown's good to go. So a lot of these minutes kind of going everywhere. We don't really know what a set rotation is going to be, but we know that Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook will play north of 32 minutes. I do like Beal in this matchup. He's a 1.51 fantasy point per minute with NATO off the floor, 38.5% usage rate, which is almost 10% usage higher than Russell Westbrook. I have him pegged for 52.96 DraftKings points currently. So I do like Beal here. I'm going to be interested to see what his ownership is currently and what he comes in at. I'm going to go ahead and check Fantasy Cruncher right now and see what they have him at ownership. 12%. Okay, so if he stays at 12%, I really like him in tournaments. A lot of people going to Russ at the salary saving at $9K, $1,200 less than Bradley Beal. I do like that. I really like this matchup for both of these guys. They're going to rely heavily on them. 7-point home dogs is always a tough spot. So, if they're going to get this going, it's going to be because of guys like Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook. So, again, I think a lot of ownership is going to come from this game, but I do have interest somewhere else, and it's due to some really major injuries that we are seeing. And it is going to be in this game between Orlando and Toronto. Let's touch base on Orlando first with Michael Carter-Williams and Aminu off the floor. We see some smaller usage bumps to guys like Vucevic, Fournier, and Cole Anthony. No one really sticks out here. I have Vooch currently at 8,700 as a really good play. He gets a 1% usage bump. He's a 1.36 fantasy point per minute and a 29.3% usage rate overall. I have him pegged for 46.7 DraftKings points currently. I'll also have some interest in Fournier, who's a 1.09 fantasy point per minute with Michael Carter-Williams and Aminu off the floor as well. 25% usage rate. I have him pegged for 34.88 DraftKings points. So I expect both those guys to probably come in a little bit lower owned. Maybe Vooch could be a potential cash play at 8,700. That is a very cheap price tag for him. But it's yet to be seen what we have for ownership. Again, Fantasy Cruncher, I'm making this video really early in the morning, and all this ownership is going to change. But right now for Orlando, we are seeing 26.1% ownership to a guy like Aaron Gordon, and then Vooch at, 23%. Fournier coming in at 10%. So I will have some interest there in Fournier. And let's go to the other side of the ball, which is where my interest really lies between Toronto, or from Toronto, because we have Norman Powell, who is currently listed as doubtful for tonight against the Magic. And then we have OG off the floor as well. He is listed out. So I really love Fred VanVleet here at 7,700. Gets a 2% usage bump with both those guys off the floor. He's a 1.25 fantasy point per minute and a 25.4% usage rate. I have him pegged as a 6.13 value currently and 47.18 DraftKings points. So I really like Fred VanVleet. He's going to be a lock for me. I also really love Siakam at 7,600. Gets a 5% usage bump. He's a 1.07 fantasy point per minute and a 30% usage rate. So currently, as we stand with Harden questionable and not deemed out, VanVleet and Siakam are going to be 2 locks for me. I'll have some interest in Lowry, but more of a tournament play. If I have the choice between VanVleet, Siakam, and Lowry, I lean VanVleet. And then my second favorite is going to be Siakam, Lowry being the third. Bunyan boy. Unsure as to what's going on with his bunions. We also have some cheap value here. We saw Terrence Davis actually get the start last game against Sacramento. Only played 19 minutes. He was really efficient in his 19 minutes too. 1 fantasy point per minute. Not sure why they didn't go back to him. A guy like Watanabe actually played 24.5 minutes as well. So I have interest in both those guys. If Terrence Davis gets to start again, I think he's going to be cash viable at 3,500. Again, I'm a little weary with his minutes. I have him pegged for 23 currently. If he only plays 20, I would still consider him if he starts. But if he's coming off the bench, only projected at 20, I'd probably be off of him. Watanabe is a guy that I'm interested too. At 3,300 projected at 20 minutes, I wouldn't hate him as a last piece, but not piece. But right now for cash, I love VanVleet, I love Siakam. Those are going to be 2 cash locks for me. And then, I will have some interest here in Terrence Davis and Watanabe as well, depending on who they start. We thought that when OG and Powell got deemed out on Friday that Stanley Johnson would actually get the start against Sacramento, but they actually went with VanVleet and Lowry in the backcourt and then Terrence Davis at the 3. So it'll be interesting to see if they run that lineup out again against Orlando. We'll have to wait and see and monitor that throughout the day. In this last game, Cleveland and Minnesota with currently the lowest over-under on the slate. We do have some pretty big injury news that we are still pending with Naz Reid and D'Lo. Minnesota is terrible. We got to monitor that news because there will be some value here. Good luck trying to pick who the value will be because it's just every single time with Minnesota, it's an absolute crapshoot. But let's stick to Cleveland real quick. We've seen a guy like Andre Drummond really get his minutes reduced since the acquisition of Jarrett Allen. So he's going to be more of a tournament play for me. If he can play 28 to 30 minutes against this Minnesota team without Cat, I'm going to love him. He's going to be in a smash spot. But again, the minutes just haven't been there for him. So I'm going to have interest, though, in Drummond and Jarrett Allen in tournaments because I think this is a really good matchup with no Cat going up against potentially Naz Reid and Ed Davis. So I'm going to be attacking the Minnesota bigs, and I will have interest here in Drummond and Jarrett Allen. In terms of anything else, I like Sexton as a tournament play at 6,800, but I don't really have too much interest here with Kevin Love and Dellavedova off the floor. Again, the lowest over-under on the slate. I'd rather go to Brooklyn and Washington for some value, and then obviously Toronto with those 2 big guys being ruled out in OG and Powell. And then the other side of the ball with Minnesota, like I said, we are still pending Naz Reid and D'Lo. I think D'Lo will play, but I'm unsure about Naz Reid. And we have Culver, Hernan Gomez, and Cat off the floor. And again, if you look at the values, nothing really stands out here. Vanderbilt's a decent play. I have him pegged for 27.5 DraftKings points. Doesn't get too big of a usage bump with those guys off the floor. So, Naz Reid's out. Ed Davis at 3,300. I wouldn't hate him as a last piece, but I'd be so scared to go there just because there's always blow-up potential here. I wouldn't expect Cleveland to come in and blow the doors off of Minnesota. So if it's more of a competitive game, wouldn't hate a guy like Ed Davis as a last piece. And I will have some interest here if D'Lo sits. If Naz Reid is out, I'd probably have some interest in Vanderbilt and, like I said, Ed Davis. But if D'Lo is in, I probably would be off some of these cheaper guys like Anthony Edwards, Rubio, Okogie, and Jaden McDaniels and Jalen Noel as well. But if D'Lo is out, I think that opens up some of the cheaper value here. More so tournaments, not really some cash plays. But yeah, that's kind of where my head and my thought process is right now, guys. So like I said, if I'm locking in anybody for cash currently, it's going to be VanVleet and it's going to be Siakam. This is definitely a team that I want to target, especially with the injury news that we already have. So make sure throughout the day you're keeping an eye on this James Harden situation. I think it's going to be huge for the slate, especially in the highest over-under currently at 244. Embiid news is huge. Doug McDermott is pretty significant on a 4-game slate. And then Naz Reid and D'Lo is something we need to monitor as well. Hopefully, because that game tips off at 8, the other 3 games tipping off at 7, we get that news before the slate starts. But if not, it will open up some interesting leverage and some good tournament pivots that you might be able to tinker with your lineup after lock. All right. Appreciate you guys coming by, watching this video. For those of you who are not Patreon members, the link is below. Patreon, $20 a month, gets you access to all of our cheat sheets for every single sport that we cover here on DraftKings. It also gets you an invite to our Discord channel where you can literally yuck it up and talk DraftKings lineup construction with everybody in our Discord. You can also at me and Matt and ask and any of our coaches and ask us any questions about basketball. You know, we got Kevin crushing MMA, NFL. Obviously, we only have the Super Bowl left. We got League of Legends, CS:GO. I know Call of Duty starting up soon. We got baseball on the horizon as well, NHL too. So make sure you guys check us out. And if you're interested, Discord, the link is below. Appreciate you guys. I will catch you guys later for the live stream with Matt and I. And, you know, with all that being said, let's cash.